have a premonition. We might have to change the name of our podcast from Autonomy Markets to Waymo Markets, because each and every week, Waymo's keeping us glued to our screens, watching the news that's happening in the autonomy markets. And this week, we've got a lot of news to break down with Waymo. We also had Elon came out of hibernation. He left 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, went to Austin for an all-hands meeting, which was streamed live on X. And next week, you and I are off to Dallas-Fort Worth for Forward Fort Worth, hosted by Mr. Ross Perot Jr. A lot of things going on, but let's start with Waymo. What do you make of this nonstop drumbeat of Waymo news?
I mean, it's incredible how busy Waymo is keeping us. I'm sure it's topping off for your media library of autonomy content, which is already the largest out there. I looked at this. I think you've got over 400 videos in terms of whether it's the autonomy markets and a lot of these interviews that you've been doing in the past. No other library of content on autonomy that I'm aware of that's out there. So Waymo is just going to give us even more info week to week, and this one is going to, I think, fill up most of today's podcast. So yeah, I'm excited for us to get to it.
And for our listeners and viewers, a sneak peek, we have a very special episode next week with Nat Buse, Chief Safety Officer Aurora, talking about closing the safety case and going fully autonomous Dallas to Houston. And then another sneak peek the week after, Jeremy Bird from Lyft is on to talk about Lyft's autonomy strategy. So tune in the next 2 weeks. We're building that catalog there, and it's a lot of fun. Well, let's stay on Waymo. Waymo is the de facto king of the robotaxi market. Last week, we talked about from an NBC Bay Area report how Waymo was granted access to map at SFO. And this week, we have confirmation both from Waymo and from the San Francisco International Airport. In a post on X, Waymo wrote the following, and quote, SFO is at the top of the wish list for many of our riders. This mapping permit is an important step towards bringing our service to the millions of people who travel to and from the city each year. One step closer to the great airport unlock, Walt.
And look, I know we talked about this last week because there was a local press report that we highlighted on last week's podcast. But when you have the confirmation on something like this, it obviously gets more attention. Like we had something similar this week with Lyft. Lyft started talking about May mobility, and Bloomberg, wrote this very long piece on, Lyft and their autonomy. And it's a scoop that May Mobility is going to be launching in Atlanta. We talked about that last week and also gave you some kind of insights onto how our rides went in their actual vehicles out in Ann Arbor. So it's when it hits this point, when you get more and more data points, it just provides more attention for Waymo. So I think this is great and great progress for getting to the San Francisco airport opened up, which again, to your point, we've talked about. Huge unlock for the company in terms of what it means, not only the airport, but also what it implies for highways.
But there's a catch, Walt. It's not as good as it sounds. Waymo's current permit, which expires on April 13th and can be renewed for additional 30 days, has a very distinct clause in it, a clause that I don't like, and I'm sure Waymo doesn't like. And I'm going to quote that clause from the contract. It says, the permit shall prohibit the movement of commercial goods by use of an autonomous vehicle on airport property. Commercial goods means any goods, wares, merchandise, or other tangible items requiring transportation for a fee or a commercial purpose. Commercial goods include any items for which a motor carrier permit is required. End quote.
So what does that mean?
Otherwise known as you cannot operate a commercial service.
Well, that doesn't make any sense. So are you sure that that's how it reads?
Yes, because I looked into this. There's another permit. This is California, after all. You think you can have one permit and go on your merry way? No. This is the permit state. And the permit state. You need a permit for this, a permit for that. In order to operate a commercial service, here we go, Waymo has to obtain a ground transportation operating permit from SFO. Then they can legally operate. What kind of resistance or pushback do you think they're going to get when they go for that permit?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there might be 4 or 5 permits ultimately that they have to get before they can operate at the airport. But this still doesn't take away that was a good milestone, and it's indicative that this is moving forward. Curious, Grayson, Teamsters, I mean, some of the stuff you mentioned, when you start talking about goods and wares and merchandise and things like that, when you're studying this permit, Teamsters pops into my head. Do they get involved? I mean, it doesn't seem like there aren't unions impacted at Waymo or for taxi cabs. So do they, as they're going for these additional permits, will there be a role that Teamsters plays?
Yes, and this is reported in the San Francisco Standard and the San Francisco Examiner that Waymo got the no commercial operations as a carve out for the Teamsters not to put up a fight and stop it. It was a carve out. But when they go for the operating permit, the Teamsters are going to show up and they are going to fight it. The Teamsters do not like autonomy. They want to stop it. The Teamsters have a long history of trying to stop new emerging technologies. If you look at AB5, going back to 2019, which Uber and Lyft successfully fought and stopped, where an Uber and Lyft driver are independent contractors, they want to make them employees so they can unionize. The unions do not like autonomy because they cannot unionize it at the end of the day. They can't organize it, and they're going to fight tooth and nail to stop this. And unfortunately, that's the sad part.
I mean, they can't unionize Uber either, or they haven't unionized Lyft. So what's the incremental difference here?
They've tried with AB5 because then the drivers become employees and they can unionize. That's why they want them to become employees, and they can do it. The Teamsters, and I'm going to say the quiet part out loud, is the Teamsters need to support the pension fund. So they need more members to support the pension fund. This is not about necessarily about jobs. It's about supporting the pension fund. And that's why they're trying to stop autonomy, bottom line.
Ultimately, I've got faith in technology process. Our guy, Secretary Duffy, is active. In fact, he's so active, he's still trying to shut down my congestion pricing in New York, which, I mean, I like the fact that I can kind of get across Midtown relatively quickly. But more importantly, San Francisco Mayor Lurie seems to get it. Maybe he's listening to the podcast. He shared, I think, a statement I think I have in front of me here with the NBC Bay Area with regard to SFO, just saying, by working to expand transportation options to and from San Fran Airport, we're going to make it easier for tourists and business travelers to experience our great city, strengthen our economy, and welcome the world back to San Francisco. I mean, so, it feels like he's on board. Can he get it done? Because last week, you actually pointed this out in terms of the importance of the mayors in this process. That's what I was asking you about. I was skeptical. Seems like you were spot on. Can he get it done in the great city of San Francisco?
We hope he can. And I want to state for the record, I give the mayor a lot of credit. The mayor is tackling some of the biggest problems in the city, the homelessness, the open drug markets. And we're seeing in the local San Francisco papers and on the news, he's breaking these drug encampments down. He's tearing them down, and he's trying to bring back the convention business. The mayor of San Francisco realizes that if you don't clean the city up, the economy is going to die. And if you look at San Francisco, as a big part of their economy is tourism. Another very large part of their economy is the convention business. Well, what complements tourism and conventions? Waymo. So if the mayor really wants to revitalize his economy, he needs to fight tooth and nail to allow Waymo to operate at the SFO airport. And if the mayor is stopped politically, the mayor needs to come out publicly and give some economic data, because Waymo's giving economic data. If you combine LAX and SFO, you're looking at $100 million a year positive economic impact. That has a really big impact on San Francisco's economy. The economic data side, if the political blowback is this, does Waymo go out to the people? Because this is Waymo data. In December 2024, there were approximately 13,366 searches for SFO on the Waymo app. In addition, 718 people tried to download the app while at the airport. Does Waymo start putting billboards up at the airport? So-and-so wants to ban this technology. Text this number to support it and really just hyper-target it, or buy ads inside the airport to really try and get this over the finish line?
Google feels like they're more hands-off, unlike Uber, who, when they had their battle in terms of labor versus gig workers and how drivers are classified, was certainly a lot more aggressive. I'm not sure Google plays things the same way. They're probably more, behind the scenes. So we'll see.
We will see, but I believe it's only a matter of time, and I'll make a prediction. June, July 2025, Waymo will be operating commercial paid service at the San Francisco International Airport. And when that happens, Walt, you want to take an Autonomy Markets road trip and go out there and experience it firsthand?
Sure. I mean, after you said all those great things about the open drug markets and and everything else in San Francisco, you made it so appealing. But I guess we can take those airport rides different directions. And I like that you're back on the board in terms of your predictions. So again, what was the prediction for San Fran Airport? When's it going to be open?
June, July 2025.
Got it. So let's continue to the San Jose airport, because this week Waymo also announced that they received permission from the DMV of California to operate autonomously there. I don't know if they're going to have enough cars for that, but hopefully they've got some going. That includes almost all of San Jose. When is that airport? And while you're at it, give us a prediction for LAX. So give us a prediction for the San Jose airport, the Los Angeles airport, and then just San Jose in general, when it's going to be open.
San Jose in general, May 2025. Airport, September, October 2025. LAX, the end of the year, with the caveat, if Mayor Bass is recalled, then you'll see that accelerate. If she's not recalled, then we're probably going to push that to 26.
I mean, that's a lot of stuff to happen in 2025. This is a big year in California based on those predictions. I don't even know if they can source enough cars to execute on those predictions, Grayson, but I like the boldness. We're going to mark it down. And when they happen, if you follow us on Twitter, or as they call it now, X, we'll replay these clips and say Grayson was right or Grayson was wrong. Let's keep going, though. I've got another one for you, because this is a prediction you did get right, because you talked about Nashville. I think it goes back to episode 7 on here, and I think we sent some of those clips out. Waymo sent out a tweet that with a bunch of emojis. I'm a great translator of emoji, as I've got many kids, so I figured out how the emojis work. It looks like Waymo is going to start checking out Nashville, or test drivers, or however they call it. When do you think Nashville launches? And by the way, congrats on your prediction.
Thank you. 2026, mid 2026, because right now I want to clarify, it is a road trip city, not a mapping city. Mid 2026. So I will go on the record. I will say by April 2026, if they begin mapping operations by July, August of 2025, we're looking at April 2026. So you're all these predictions. It comes to my mind. Come on down. Are you playing Bob Barker now? Are we doing the price is right, but the prediction is right? Is that what we're doing?
Well, as long as you're making the predictions, then I don't have to, and then I can't be wrong, so I'll let you be the one to be wrong. Although you're more often right than wrong. I'm going to ask you a follow up on the Nashville one though. How many cars will they launch with, and who will be the manufacturer of that automobile in Nashville in mid 2026?
Sub 50 vehicles. It would be the Hyundai Ioniq 5.
Wow. Okay, Hyundais.
And I have a further prediction for that. This is based on a breakfast that I had in San Jose, of all places. Years ago, when she was Congresswoman Blackburn, I had breakfast with Congresswoman Blackburn, and now she's Senator Blackburn of Tennessee. Had lots of conversations around autonomy. I will further predict that Senator Blackburn will be one of the first public officials to ride in a Waymo vehicle in the city of Nashville, because Senator Blackburn is very bullish on autonomy.
Yes, she is. Now, Grayson, we get a lot of great information from Reddit. What a great resource, especially the Waymo Reddit. And within there, I saw someone post a picture of what looked like a Hyundai Waymo on a truck for early delivery. Now, we talked about this in past episodes and the priority of AV Ride versus Waymo. So I'm going to ask you for another prediction. Is it possible we see commercial Hyundais on Hyundai, however you pronounce it, Jaguar, it goes. Do we see a Hyundai commercial in any Waymo markets in calendar year 2025?
I'll give you a prediction under one circumstance and caveat.
I'm listening. I can't wait.
You must make a Jaguar commercial for Hyundai. If you can make it worse than that, then I'll give you a prediction.
I think what we should do whenever they launch Hyundai, we'll have AI create a commercial for Hyundai in the style that Jaguar did. By the way, did you see the follow-up there where they're claiming we don't care about having a broad market? This is the market we're going for. This was not a mistake. This is exactly what we wanted to accomplish.
It's brand evaluation. It just you might as well put it in a blunt, go smoke it up with Snoop Dogg, because it went up in smoke.
Look, I'm not going to ask you for a timeline on this one, but I'm just going to throw this as an open-ended question. We talked about, and first of all, I don't think that you're going to need to link the southern part of the valley to the northern part before they launch San Francisco airport. That seems clear. The question is, Like, do they complete that gap in between before, now that we're going to have like highways opened up, right? I assume that we're going to have whatever that road is around San Francisco opened up, if it's not already. When do they send me across the bridge to Sausalito or the other way towards Lafayette, which is a special place in my heart? I used to spend a lot of time there. This was the headquarters for Nextel, my very first employer, when they were launching digital operations. If you remember the push-to-talk walkie-talkies, they were based out of, it was based on the East Coast, but the digital operations were based on the West Coast. I digress. When are we going to get it that way? Or is Waymo going to send us, over those bridges and towards Lafayette before they expand more in the valley? Or is it really just, completing the footprint in the valley?
Completing the footprint in the valley. I do not see it going over there, but I had the Nextels. I used to love those things. I had the Nextel phone that you sold. Then I had the BlackBerry Nextel. I thought I was the coolest guy in the world. And I was in DC with some people that work for a service that's supposed to be secret. And we would do that stuff. That was the coolest thing. I used to love it because you didn't use my minutes. I was a big Nextel fan. But what the heck happened? Why did Nextel go bloop, 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 bye-bye?
That was the classic Grayson. That's the classic Grayson sound effect, the bloop, bloop, bloop. You never want to be a company in the autonomy space that Grayson Brulte associates with the bloop, 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 bloop. Because that's like when the Pac-Man gets hit by the ghost, and it's that sound, not a good sound. Sprint was the one that killed Nextel. But I do remember, I was there during the early days when we were first launching some of these digital operations. We had one of these launches in LA, big investor meeting. We had like the drive test set up, just like we talked about last week with May Mobility. And there was an earthquake in LA that morning. And we're sitting there, all the investors are in this conference room in this hotel. I forget the name of the hotel in Los Angeles. And like the critical decision was like, do you hit the master reset button, which was going to take however long it was going to take to reset the whole system before the presentations ended, and these investors were going to go out on the road on their drive test to see if it was called the Motorola IDEN. That was the technology. That Motorola IDEN network worked. When I go on some of these drive tests, it brings me like, bad memories of those stressful times of trying to show investors whether your technology works. So I can definitely feel for some of these these startup companies and the stress they're going through, and when having to deliver on the timelines that investors want.
You're going to reset it. Did you have a big red button? Go,
that was an engineer. In that case, it worked. It was a good event. And look, we got that company to work. I think Sprint was the one that killed it. But just see us on Lightshed on the podcast. Maybe we talk about that from time to time.
Well, check out Lightshed. Going across the bridge in Sausalito, I don't see a market there. I do see a potential market. This is a smaller market of Napa Sonoma from a tourism perspective, eventually for Waymo. Don't have a timeline on it. If you just look at the pure economics and the amount of DUIs. Oh, speaking of DUIs, what do you think that the number one type of alcohol is for DUI in Napa Valley?
In Napa Valley? I mean, it's got to be, do I have to name the actual grape or just say wine in general?
Well, it depends if you want to be fancy Walt or sommelier Walt.
I'll stick with wine then.
Beer.
Really?
Yep. All the workers drink beer and get dewies.
That's because people that enjoy to sip their wine, they're on their bikes. They're driving drunk on their bike. Can you get arrested for driving drunk on your bike from winery to winery? The way to do it, people, is rent. Well, maybe not an Uber out there. I guess you can go Uber to Uber from the winery. Get one of those vans, the party vans, and take you to each winery.
Party vans are great, and you can get a DUI. And they had somebody in Florida happen on a horse.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, autonomy will fix all this. Waymo needs to open up in the Napa Valley. Then that should be skip over to that, right? Forget about everything in between.
Skip over to that. So yes, you have some individuals that will get the party bus. Then some individuals there will take an Uber or Lyft, and then at SFO, some individuals take an Uber or Lyft. But when Waymo enters that market, they're going to take market share on day one away from Uber and Lyft. I know once I can go to Palo Alto and I can go into the city and never have to go into an Uber Lyft and only go Waymo. Doesn't matter what points you throw at me, what bonuses or what, I'm going Waymo the whole way. They're going to take away market share. Then how is Uber and Lyft going to react? Because Dara sits out there, or Waymo's our friend. I'm going to use the term frenemies at the end of the day. That's really what this is, because I said this on X and I'm going to say this now on the pod. Uber needs Waymo Waymo doesn't need Uber.
I mean, I think they're doing what they need to do, and there's only so many announcements that you can make, right? And at some point, you start out to some of these partners that you're working with have to deliver results. There's some more announcements that are certainly in the work. I still think Lyft it can get something done with Waymo. You know, Uber. We've talked about this before and what they can potentially do with Wave. Uber can potentially step in and try and cut a market or get a market done with May Mobility, in addition to the May Mobility market that exists with Lyft. So I think there's you know, there's things that they can announce that will show people the progress that they're trying to develop. And you know, I think it's still early, and there's still an opportunity for a lot of these companies. The more companies we meet, these are clearly smart people, clearly have made progress. Yes, it's a challenge relative to where Waymo is and where Tesla may be very shortly, but I wouldn't count any of these companies out quite yet.
I'm not saying count them out, but they will lose market share because Waymo scaling. Going back to Reddit, I got to give a shout out to the Waymo subreddit. First of all, thanks for sharing Walt and I's show every week to the individual Mr. Walkie Talkie 22, sir. Thanks for sharing the show.
Oh, you're doing an individual call out now. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot to Walt and I. We really appreciate that. And to the individuals that are on the street taking photos, thanks for posting that because that helps us do our job when we analyze this market. We're now getting the powder blue Zeekrs are popping up everywhere. We're seeing it without camouflage in San Francisco. And then we had a photo from Reddit of a camouflage one popping up in Scottsdale. Walt, I was wrong. The more I study this, the more I realize that Waymo scaling the Zeekr, and perhaps it wasn't an unforced error.
Oh, wow. How about that? That's a crazy admission. That's a shot. You really caught me off guard on that one. I think a lot of times, sometimes when you admit you're wrong on something is exactly the time when you're going to be right. So I think you just reverse jinx them by saying you were wrong, and then we're going to wake up next week and there's going to be a government movement against the Zeekrs. But going back to what you said in terms of Reddit, like Rich Greenfield, my partner at Lightshed, always likes to say Twitter breaks first, or news breaks first on Twitter. I don't remember seeing those powder blue Zeekrs on Twitter. And if they did, they were probably referencing pictures that they saw on Reddit. So maybe news is breaking first in the autonomy space on Reddit. So yeah, those powder blue ones are interesting. But it also comes at a time when Zeekr is talking about doing autonomy. Granted, it's ADAS. It's not really autonomy. BYD is, promoting the fact that their electric cars are going to charge effectively twice as fast as Tesla. So there's momentum, or at least news flow, out of these Chinese companies at the time when these Chinese cars are showing up on San Francisco streets. I don't know if that's good or bad, because it just highlights them in front of an administration that's coming up to tariffs deadlines in early April, and a focus not only for our own country, but in Mexico, you've got trade deficits with China as well. Like, I still think that that's a risk. So before you take the loss on the unforced error, let's see how things play out over the next couple of months. By all means, I hope that Waymo can get the cars that they need to continue to expand in the markets. And let's be clear that these Waymo cars, these Zeekr cars are getting Waymo's technology put on top of what is, a Chinese vehicle. It is not the Chinese vehicle itself. It is not a Hyundai LiDAR. Waymo makes their own LiDARs. So there's arguments that can be made that can push this technology forward. But with that said, if you're Elon and you're looking at this, all these, the charging speed and Zeekr doing autonomy, and you're in a position that he's in, I wouldn't count that risk out yet. But, it's big of you to at least say that, maybe it wasn't a complete unforced error.
It's still a risk. There's no doubt about it. But the reason I'm retracting for the moment is because they're obviously scaling these vehicles up, and all signs point to it entering commercial service. Could Waymo potentially pivot out and cut a deal with Foxconn, since Foxconn is now contract manufacturing vehicles? Obviously, Taiwanese versus Chinese, a big difference there. Perhaps put a plant in America with a similar shape. But the bottom line of all of this is It's very evident and very clear China wants to export autonomy to the world, and the Trump administration is going to have to make a decision and put an end to that. That's what's going to have to happen. Is Waymo going to be caught up in that? I don't know.
Look, at the end of the day, Waymo has to put all this aside and do risk mitigation. This is not new to them in terms of who is elected and what's on the agenda. So you have to assume that, they're working, to accelerate the timeline on Hyundai and the deliveries there, or at least the evaluation of those vehicles, and also working towards finding a different, additional vendors so that they can get the supply of cars to keep up with how the technology is advancing and how the governments, local and federal, are enabling them to open up into new markets. And look, if Elon delivers, even if it's safety driver in, but Austin in June, autonomous driving, there's going to be more heat on them. And we've seen them be reactive in the past to try and move faster in terms of expanding, their supply in the market. So we just have to wait and see. Look, I've heard that Waymo, it takes a long time to get deals done. Just look at how long it's seemingly taking them to get a deal with Lyft in a new market. I mean, so hopefully it's an organization that hasn't gotten so big that they can't move quickly in pivoting to other OEMs. But hopefully we'll have news on that, within the next 6 months, at least at an announcement of a new vendor.
It's very clear Waymo scaling, and they're going to do new vehicles. The interesting thing with the Hyundai Ioniq 5s, they're being built in Georgia, assembled and built in America. So perhaps they can do a deal within another U.S. OEM or a manufacturer that's going to build. Perhaps VW has a plant in Tennessee, because you and I talked about it. We even got inbound on it during South by Southwest when Waymo launched. People could not get paired. And we have a really awesome listener and viewer. And sir, I'm probably going to butcher your name, but I'm really sorry about this. Tarun Vanish. He's based in Austin. He sends us really great notes. He went out, he put on his Autonomy Markets hat. We'll have to send him a hat, have him made and send one to him. And he went out and found the Waymo depot, Walt. And lo and behold, he counted 33 Waymos. And he went around to various different parts of Austin, the ODD. He had no problem getting paired with a Waymo. Was the issue with Waymo, Uber, Austin, just because the demand of South by Southwest and perhaps those 33 vehicles that we can count now is the right amount, perhaps move up to maybe 50, 75?
It's 37 square miles in Austin. I think this time I got it right, unlike last week. So I think you're definitely going to need more than 33 cars to service that amount of mileage and the amount of demand. Of course, South by Southwest, you have a client base that would really wanted to test these things. So yeah, there was huge demand. Who knows how many of those 33 were provisioned, or maybe there had to be some additional calibration that was there. So between the demand kind of falling off and also who knows how the allocation is even going in the Uber app. I assume that Uber still hasn't added an additional tier. So I think it's a combination of those things. 37 is probably a good start for where they are now. Again, this is a supply issue. It's logical that they would hold back on any JAGs that they continue to have in inventory that are getting processed for some of these new markets that we're talking about, and to have them there. So why, flood the market? It's unfortunate because I don't think we're going to get a real sense on what an Uber Waymo market can really look like until the supply gets up there much larger. Now, with that said, 37. I mean, can you imagine how many Uber cars are in Austin for that square mileage? So it gets back to what we talked about a couple episodes. I'm not even sure that you're going to get close to the volume that's necessary, or that many people have thought is necessary, before you're enough of a service to have an impact on the existing rideshare operators in a given market. 33, which is the number of JAGs that Tarun has counted, may not be enough, but how many more do you think they really need? 70 more? Double the amount, 60, get to 70, and you probably have got, 8-minute, 9-minute pickup time?
Potentially. A friend of mine was actually in Austin today. We were texting before the show. He said he saw him everywhere, but yet when he went to open the app, he couldn't get paired. So that's interesting. So maybe needs to go to 200, perhaps. And then what's going to happen when AV Ride launches in Austin? What's going to happen if Zoox ever launches in Austin, where you have 3 competing services? What does that do?
I think it's great, but if these are new services, I mean, I guess there's the issue of like, are you going to want to have to deal with 3 or 4 different apps as an individual user? How much will the market bear? Maybe rather than going to the Uber app and saying, I want to select Uber Black, you're going to go directly to the Zoox app itself because that is the ride that you want. That's not available to you as a Waymo customer, but maybe people are doing that just based on their preference in the moment. Or you go into one app and the wait time is too long. I mean, people end up being lazy though, right? So if the market ends up being too fragmented, even in the terms of the number of apps that are available, who's going to win there? It's going to be Uber, because fragmentation in any part of that stack is going to be best for the market dominant player in the moment, which is Uber.
Because then laziness kicks in. I don't want to download an app. They're just going to default to what's on their phone. And then that's why no matter what happens with autonomy, no matter how this shakes out, Uber's still going to play a role. We don't know exactly what that role is going to play, but they're going to play a role. We do know that Waymo is expanding at a healthy, rapid pace. And there was a post on X. Waymo's potentially looking to go across the pond. The British ambassador to the United States went for a ride in a Waymo vehicle this week. Waymo retweeted it and said, and quote, "We can't wait to one day bring the magic of Waymo 1 to the UK."
Look, first of all, obviously London's a very important city. You got to wonder if the progress that Wave is making, and Wave, which is in London as well as Stuttgart, but you got to wonder whether the focus of Waymo in London is somehow related to that. Just like Austin somehow attracts attention, it's like, in what we talked about earlier in the podcast, competition, response, like announcing something the day before your competitor's about to announce something, or if our competitor is going to launch a market, launching ahead of time. I had this with T-Mobile and SpaceX launching their satellite connectivity ahead of when Apple was launching their satellite connectivity. This is how CEOs act and how companies act. So I just got to wonder if that's a driving force on Waymo looking at that supply of cars and saying, okay, let's allocate some to the UK to make sure that we're there ahead of Wave. I don't think this really matters to Wave, because Wave's going to kind of do its thing. It's going to get its technology to work. And if it's worked, there's a lot of OEMs that are going to need, the technology that Wave can offer, if successful, into their cars, which has nothing to do with fleets or not fleets. And frankly, Waymo isn't currently planning on licensing their technology to OEMs. That could change in the future. So I don't know. Maybe we're overthinking the UK for that reason. These aren't really enemies in that regard. And I don't think Wave in and of itself is going to enable Uber to win. Uber needs Wave and May Mobility and many autonomy companies to keep that market fragmented enough so they can hold off the competition that obviously is developing at Waymo.
The key common denominator, that repost from Waymo came the day before Alex Kendall gave a keynote at NVIDIA GTC.
So there you go.
There you go. And as Wave and Alex scale up, perhaps Waymo doesn't want them to get a foothold on that market. They want to move faster. Prediction corner, Walt. You're going first and I'm going second.
Uh-oh.
I believe Waymo will expand to London at some point. My prediction, 2027 commercial service in London. Undefined ODD. Don't know if I'll go to the City of London, Westminster, where, but I'm just going to use London. Heathrow, 28. London, 27. My predictions for Waymo in the UK. Doo-doo-doo-doot. Here comes my noises. Your turn, Walt.
I'm going to answer it this way. I'm going to say Uber and Wave are going to beat them and have something announced in this calendar year and deliverable in 2026 and in the market ahead of whatever Waymo is going to be in that same market.
Now, I'm going to throw another wrinkle into you. Doo-doo-doo-doot.
Uh-oh.
When does Tesla FSD start operating on the roads of the UK without a driver? Unsupervised.
Without a driver? Wow. I think this is going to be subjecting myself to a lot of external pain if I talk about when Tesla anywhere will be driver out. I think you're still looking at a potential end by end of year 2026. I'm going to say it like I know there's a lot of questions out there. Look, there's people that are making videos of Tesla's crashing into walls and through rain. Under further investigation, they didn't have the right hardware. They didn't have FSD on, and the dude flipped it on in the last 5 minutes. Completely disingenuous for someone that claims to be science focused. But I don't know. Like I caveat that. We spend a lot of time with the LiDAR companies. I totally appreciate and understand the benefits of LiDAR. I also own a Tesla, and I know how it drives, and I've been in these test drives, and I know the progress that they have made in other areas. So I'm saying driver out by the end of next year. And it doesn't matter where it is, dude. Whether it's London, California, Austin, that's the bigger prediction when he actually gets to that point.
In Austin, I'll go with that prediction. Yes. Outside of Austin, unsure, but I'll go with Austin, that prediction. Mr. Musk, he's back in the saddle. He did an all hands town hall last night. He looked relaxed. He looked calm. It wasn't broadcast from 1600, I'll let you know. It was broadcast from Giga. What did you think?
I mean, there was a lot of things said at that town hall. 50,000 optimists next year, or in his terms, legions. A Roman legion is 5,000 soldiers. So now, you have qubits. I'm sure everyone knows what a qubit is. Maybe you don't. Look it up. Legions is how he's going to. So it's 10 legions, 50,000 of these robots next year. I asked Rich Greenfield, who I think his wife forced him to return his Tesla, whether he would buy one of these robots when they came off. He's always like, I got to buy it first type of guy. Didn't really get a straight answer out of him. You're going to have Tesla's cybercabs rolling off the line was it 5 minutes, 5 seconds? Whatever it was is ridiculously fast. The world is going to be powered by solar energy. 95% of power is solar energy. Not sure how that works unless we have a shit ton of batteries, but okay. And what else was there, Grayson? What am I missing? I mean, he was very bullish on autonomy, and he stole your tagline for autonomy. So, it's a classic Elon futurist, preaching what can happen.
Mr. Musk, if you listen to the podcast, perhaps you got the inspiration for the future is bright, the future is autonomous. With that said, we'd love to have you on. Walt will be nice. I own a Tesla. Walt owns a Tesla, so you're in good hands, and love to have a conversation with you, sir, about the future of autonomy. Walt and I will put our cowboy hats on and boot buckles, and we'll head to Austin, and we'll do it in person, or we can do it from 1600 in the Eisenhower building. Whatever you want. We'd love to do it. Walt, while your prediction holds, I agree with Austin. I'm unsure outside of that market, but this week in California, the California Public Utilities Commission gave Tesla a permit to operate a transportation service in the state. Big caveats here. This is not an autonomous vehicle permit. Tesla must own and operate the vehicle, but it's still a step forward. Could we see Tesla operate a rideshare service for employees to learn and model a service prior to going for the other permits to launch a commercial service?
That question, all it does is make me worried about my end of 26 prediction now, because now you're talking about doing employees in California, which we know takes permit upon permit upon permit. So now I'm having already doubting myself on whether end of 26 we can make this possible. Dang. Can I go to end of 2027? Can I change my prediction? What is Elon's prediction in terms? He was saying he's going to be in multiple markets driver out by the end of next year, right? Or nationwide. Wasn't his prediction nationwide? Driver out end of 2026? I did not say that.
He tends to get a little bullish.
Dang. I think I might want to push mine out to 2027. Fuck it. I'm staying with 26. That's all right. Be bold or go home.
See? You got to stick to your guns. Exactly. That's what we are on Autonomy Markets. Stay on the go big, go bold NVIDIA. GTC was a Rockstar convention this week. What are your thoughts on GTC?
Yeah, it was a stadium, right? And yeah, I've been to a lot of analyst meetings during a lot of bull and bear cycles, and I didn't go to this one, but that's kind of even beyond some of the stuff I saw at Apple or back in the day with Lucent and Ericsson. They announced something with GM. It's unclear exactly what it is, but I sent Mobileye stock plummeting. Talked about how NVIDIA may want to own more of this stack in autonomy as opposed to just enabling the providers in that space, like Neuro, who we're still waiting for Neuro to cut their deal with a new OEM. They use NVIDIA. I guess let's flip the dynamic on this one. Do you think this changes the trajectory for General Motors to now, be partnered up with NVIDIA.
Nope. Zero, zero, zero. No change. It was a typical NVIDIA press release with no teeth. So you're going to use their chips. So I own a bunch of Macs. Well, I put out a press release. I'm using Macs. There's no substance to this. And zero.
I think there was more substance in that. I forget the term that they used. It was Cosmos and something else. They were basically doing what the CEO of Wabi, or at least the report, the MIT report, I think it was MIT report about Wabi, was talking about, which was using virtualization to do your simulations to figure out how to get autonomy to work. And that was part of so it almost to a certain extent validated what Raquel has said previously. And now GM benefits from this. I don't think they were just saying T-Mobile did something like this they brought Jensen to an investor day that we were at. And then you kind of ask them after the fact, what exactly is this? How much revenue are you going to be running through these products? And it's it's more of a science test lab. This seemed more than that, but you're calling bullshit. You don't think that's the case in terms of GM.
Most NVIDIA press releases have nothing to them. It's I got an investment from Microsoft, but you dive into it, for example, and it's all credits. You're going to run their software, you're going to run their hardware, but there's nothing there because if you have the world's best software, the world's best hardware, you need the world's best engineers. And what GM did to Cruise does not give them any path forward to get the world's best engineers to work there to build an autonomous driving stack. They had the opportunity with Cruise. They mismanaged it. They don't have the engineering talent, even if all this works. At the end of the day, and I'll make a very bold prediction here, GM will not be able to develop a autonomous driving stack in-house, and they will have to license it. Who they license it from, not ready to make a prediction on that, but GM will be forced to license an autonomous driving stack. We will look back in history and we'll realize the mismanagement of Cruise led to that situation where GM's margins over time are going to erode because the power has shifted to the software developer.
I can see you're getting fired up. I like it. It's kind of anti-OEMs, which we've talked about before. I'm going to go back to the Elon presentation because he also showed some, what's the word for the 18-wheelers? I think they have a term for it. You know more about the truck? A semi. They showed that Tesla semis, they were electric, and they're going to be their own OEM. And they're obviously going to be autonomous. And to the extent that there's pressure on car OEMs, how do these four trucking companies not look at that and say, oh man, the pressure's on us. We better try and help to accelerate the development of the many technology partners that are out there, whether that's, Aurora or, Kodiak or Wabi or who else? Pronto. Who am I forgetting? Is it Pronto?
That's Anthony Lewandowski's company focused on mining, but it's not the autonomous driving for 18-wheeler companies that are in trouble. They have very clear paths. They have very clearly defined paths to building big businesses. It's the OEMs that are in trouble. The OEMs, truck OEMs, went all in on electrification because of the Biden mandates. Well, they failed. Jim Mullen, who led the Clean Freight Coalition, was able to get some of that stuff overturned. So they put all these billions of dollars into it. Meanwhile, autonomy keeps going. They didn't really invest in it. Power shifted to the autonomous driving developers for trucking. Now they're, what do we do? Tesla's coming out with a semi that's electric with autonomy. They're losing all of their power because they don't have the financial resources to invest in autonomy now because they put all their money into electrification, which turned out to be a very, very, very bad bet. And now you're seeing the truck OEMs play catch up. We saw a press release last week with Traton and Applied Intuition, where Applied Intuition is now going to power all the software for Traton. The announcement with Applied Intuition and Traton is a thing to come for the future. All the software on these trucks is going to be done by a Silicon Valley company, and all the autonomous driving software will be done by a Silicon Valley company. It's game over. They just lost. They lost all the power and all the control because they didn't properly read the market.
That's way too dramatic. No chance it's game over because Elon shows a couple of semis driving through a warehouse, where and he does this classic promise of it's going to happen next year, and God knows when it's actually going to show up. Just like he said, hey, I'm going to make airplanes. we're well aware of the challenge that eVTOLs have in terms of getting batteries to work for airplanes, and somehow he's going to disrupt Boeing. I don't think Boeing stock even reacted today to that claim. I don't think it's game over, but I agree with you that the issue is with the trucking companies, not the tech companies. And my only point was it puts more pressure on them that maybe have dragged their feet with some of their existing relationships to try and accelerate that, or evaluate whoever your technology partner is now and say, we need multiple technology partners and play a greater role. I know Kodiak believes you can just kind of, put it onto whatever truck is there. I get that, but it's certainly, maybe helpful to have them work with you to integrate more. And maybe there's more now pressure on some of these trucking companies to do that, or maybe for Torque to get more resources thrown at them to accelerate the timeline that they have, which is still relatively conservative compared to like what Aurora is planning on doing in the very near future. So I think it's just hopefully competition, or at least the threat of competition from a real player, right? Elon's legit, no matter how many people want to kind of, play him down, to accelerate their investments and the prioritization of it.
The truck OEMs have to make a decision. Is Volvo, what they're doing with autonomous solutions, transport service, is that the right answer? It sure is looking like a better bet than what Daimler did with electrification. Daimler has to decide what they're going to do with Torque. Are they going to fully integrate it? Are they going to leave it? And then PACCAR has to figure out what they do. Traton's relationship with Plus, what do they want to do? They're all going to have to figure out what they want to do, because at the end of the day, the OEMs for trucks are going to become contract manufacturers as autonomy scales. That's where the power dynamic is going to change. It's not Elon. It's the fact that they completely misread the market, went all on electrification. When you talk to any of the fleets, they didn't like it because it's going to get the range. And then here's autonomy, and they have no solution, and they also never invested in software. They misread the market. That's what happened. And if you look at misreading the market, you know where we're going, Walt. I'm going to give you sound today because I'm on fire. We're going to the unforced error corner. Okay. Well, last week we previewed it a little. We gave you a little taste. It was very nice, little sip of that wine. But unfortunately, the unforced error came true. This week, Zoox issued a voluntary recall for 258 vehicles due to issues with its autonomous driving system that could cause unexpected braking. We're billions upon billions upon billions of dollars, to the point where you could probably fill up a Scrooge McDuck vault and have zero revenue to show for it. There's nothing to show for it at Zoox. Besides a toaster, when does Andy Jassy pull the plug and make a decision? Because the hits keep coming, and unfortunately, you're not the Rolling Stones, so they're not going to the top of the chart. You're going to the bottom of the chart. When does Andy Jassy make a move?
When I hear you say billions and billions and billions, the only thing that pops into my head is, what was it, $300 million or so that was spent at May Mobility. And we literally sat in a car, drive her out, and drove around Ann Arbor. Now, clearly, there's more work for them to be done, but really a good, efficient use of capital. And we'll be on the street with Lyft, presumably generating some level of revenue within a couple of months. So I think that answers your question right there. And yes, that is, another unforced error of the week that has come to a conclusion. I still do, by the way, like the Zoox design, just to be clear.
See, we got Walt the designer now, ladies and gentlemen. We got Walt the designer. Mr. Jassy, if you look at the market, you invested billions of dollars in Anthropic and you're having success with that. You invested billions of dollars in Zoox and you haven't had success. When is the time to pull the plug or redo the business model? That's the question we'd love to know. Walt, we're hitting the road next week. As we said, we're headed off to Fort Worth, yippee-yi-yi-ho. What else do we need to look for in the markets besides you and I headed to Texas? And we got to find barbecue. Let's not forget barbecue. What else do we need to look for?
That is true. I don't know if we're going to have time, but yeah, we definitely have to give a barbecue review. Grayson, I don't even think we have to preview the following week. We can just be like, look, I'm sure the industry will have plenty for us to talk about next week, because every week they seem to crank out more and more info that keeps building that library.
It keeps building the library. We keep covering it. We're going to have a great episode for you. We're going to cover Ford Fort Worth, and we'll let you know what happens. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Waymo. Walt, until next week.